like this, then you are really hungry when the pizza will arrive, or you're overpaying.
Oh, the bubbles. Yeah, yeah. That's a big issue. They still have no lightning, right?
Nope, no lightning.
No lightning.
Do they use BTC Pay server or something?
No,
Or still BitPay?
Yeah, I think BitPay. Yeah. So last time I was really close to ordering with Bitcoin, and then I thought, oh, first get rid of the fiat money, and then.
There's a great website. You can see which fee rate gets you into the next block. You should check it out. It's called whatthefee.io.
Yeah, it's from a guy.
Oh, really?
Great.
Something. Something.
Yeah.
Right?
I don't know. It sounds like
I've heard
a
about
boring
that guy.
website.
He's a great mathematician. He calculates all mempool fields in his head.
Sounds like a boring website.
And then he puts on
And
the
he can
website.
cook
Right?
rice pretty good.
And he writes down the numbers on the website every minute, even in his sleep.
Nice. That I will call dedication.
Yeah. Apparently there was the German podcast Honigdachs, and they had merch on, and they're gonna talk about fees too. So I'm looking forward to
the last
This is gonna
one.
be my Sunday
Yeah.
listen.
Yeah. It's already downloaded, but there are so many podcasts. Man,
Yeah,
can't keep up. Yeah,
it's hard to keep up with all the podcasts.
yeah
But
but
there's no
at least there are a
Reckless-
few podcasts
Reckless
that are
Horse
really.
Review podcast anymore. I don't know what
Yeah,
happened there.
exactly. Yeah, that's.
Reckless horse.
Yeah.
The Reckless Horse. It's the best one.
Yeah. But it's really, it's like a
Who did the
yearly thing,
Bitcoin
right?
pumpkin? That looks fun.
CQ.
CQ or was it Bitcoin?
Hey, good call.
Nice.
CQ did it.
Yeah,
Spooky touch.
it turned out great. I like the mad one.
Yeah, this one is a cool one. He looks a little bit dumb.
Hey, alles fit?
Ja,
Okay.
danke. Gerade umgezogen. Aber
Echt?
grad
Wohin?
Rechtzeitig. Ach naja, ich ziehe immer von einem Airbnb ins andere im Moment.
Ach so, okay.
Genau.
Gibt es da viele Airbnbs in Deutschland?
Ich bin nicht in Deutschland. Sind wir
Oh,
schon
auch gut.
live? Können wir uns ja später unterhalten. Emsi, du hast heute was anderes an.
Hose.
MCA.
That's it. I muted all of you. You can't talk anymore. That's enough. That's enough. I had enough of you guys. Okay. So, let's see. What do we have today? Which day is it? It's Halloween. Okay. Happy Halloween. More importantly, it's also the 12th birthday of the Bitcoin Whitepaper. And because it's the 12th birthday, happy birthday. Woo! And because it's the 12th birthday, I decided today to invite Dmitry Buterin, who's the father of Vitalik Buterin, who actually wrote the Bitcoin white paper 12 years ago. So, hello, Dmitry. Welcome.
Pretty much.
That's really no. It's the It's the closest that we have. Like the closest person to the I guess the number 2 coin currently. It's almost the same. So welcome to Reckless VR. Thank you for coming. We do that every week. We have meetups and events in VR every weekend. If you watch this on video right now, then you should know that you can go to recklessvr.com or recklessvr on Twitter or recklessvr on Telegram, and you'll get invites every week so that you can come here. And yeah, so Dmitry is actually he's the co-founder of Ethereum's co-founder. Is that Is it an accurate description? I think it is.
Why not?
It's fair enough. So look, by the way, other than that, you also, I mean, you've been an entrepreneur for a while, and you founded BlockGeeks, which is a kind of a blockchain education website, right?
Yep.
So you do a bunch of stuff, but you also co-founded Vitalik. We have to say
Yes.
that.
Quite a
And
few
you know-
years ago. Almost
Yes.
27 years, guys.
Oh wow, that's a lot. That's a lot. Kids grow up fast. So
Yeah.
a lot of people refer to you as Vitalik's dad in the space, and you're clearly very proud of Vitalik and his work, and you wear this badge with pride. Some people want to decide what they're known for. Like, for example, there's Charles Hoskinson, who's also always kind of pissed off when people say that he's the co-founder of Ethereum, because he thinks that's not the most important thing. But I think you're clearly very proud of that label, which personally I think it's really nice. And like, what's your approach to this? To like people in the space who reach out to you and say, "Hey, you're Vitalik's dad," and you're like involved, because there are obviously everyone in the space has a dad, but we don't meet most of them. But you're pretty involved. So what's your approach to this?
Well, you know what? Labels don't change reality, right? So it's like if you look at my Twitter bio, right? Like I think many years ago, maybe it even said that I'm Vitalik's dad, but it no longer does that, right? Like I talk that I'm a philosopher, I'm a soap bubble lover, and stuff like that. And so yeah, I'm Vitalik's dad. That's reality, but that doesn't define me, right? It's like one of their many perspectives to look at me. And if people, if for somebody that's a convenient perspective, right? Think about it as an index in a database. You can have as many indices as you want to refer to, the same set of records. So this is one of them, and why not? I enjoy watching the space. I'm only, let's say, peripherally involved in this space, but I have a curious mind, and I'm a big fan of, this whole space, crypto space, originally Bitcoin, and now it's obviously a much bigger space with so many colors and shades and things and scams and exciting things and potential, right? So, so I'm good with that label.
That's good. And you introduced Vitalik to Bitcoin, right? Early on. Was that?
Sorry, your audio was breaking up a little bit.
I was saying you introduced Vitalik to Bitcoin?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, because I think I came across Bitcoin myself probably in a couple of places. One of them was Slashdot, if you guys recall what that was. And also on the podcast, there's a the longest running security podcast by Steve Gibson called GRC. So yeah, I kind of heard about this, and it's seemed like a really awesome concept, and I was kind of trying to get Vitalik interested in different things, so I kind of threw that at him, and it really took off, right? It's like, and in a different way, I guess, than anybody could have imagined.
Yeah, probably, yeah. And that was around 2011, 2012?
Yeah, probably around 2012.
Yeah. So, and since then, I mean, Vitalik did a lot of things that relate to Bitcoin. He was writing for Bitcoin Magazine. He made some Bitcoin libraries that a lot of people used, I think, back then. He actually, the first company I worked at in the space was a company that did like colored coin stuff in Israel, in Tel Aviv, and I think he was involved with them in the beginning, before I showed up. So we did a bunch of stuff, and during all this time, were you still involved with Bitcoin? Did you still track what's going on with Bitcoin, or did you kind of fade out and only came back later?
Well, I guess ever since their I was tracking it peripherally, but ever since Vitalik wrote the Ethereum white paper, which was, I still remember that, how he showed that to me in, I think it was October, November 2013. And since then, I've been tracking the whole space much more closely than before. But I mean, until recently, I still, had business to run. I have 2 other kids besides Vitalik, so I had busy life, and crypto was just like a matter of curiosity for me more than anything.
Right. So it was there, but not something you were too bothered with until you kind of brought it up again, right?
Yeah.
So I want to talk a bit about kind of Vitalik's leadership, because I'll tell you what, I'm personally, I'm not the biggest fan of Ethereum in the world. I think you know this about me, and the audience here is I think that the regulars here are mostly like hardcore Bitcoiners, but you also have a lot of new faces today that I think came to see you, and so we have like a mix here. But there's this thing about Bitcoiners that they often seem to, I find they seem to not appreciate the work that has to go into achieving something like Ethereum, even if you don't, even if you're not a fan, even if you're not bullish on Ethereum, even if you think it's not, I don't know, not like Bitcoin. Yeah, I see the sad faces, I get it. So even if you're not super bullish on Ethereum, you can still appreciate that it's a lot of it's an achievement, it's a lot of work because there have been thousands of projects in the space, at least thousands, if not order of magnitude more, and most of them just disappeared, and others they kind of faded out over time. Or didn't achieve what they set out to achieve. Ethereum is like it's 5 years in or more. If you count since the white paper, it's more. And it's it came far. It has a very involved community. Like someone had to lead this community into existence. It didn't just randomly appear. So I think it's obvious that there's a lot of work involved in that. And I wonder if you have like any thoughts on why it is that Vitalik, of course Vitalik didn't do it alone, but why it is that he was able to lead this sort of community as opposed to so many other people who tried to do the same and didn't really succeed.
Yeah. Let me share a bunch of thoughts on this, right? Like, first of all, obviously, it's you guys will see that in every technology, in everything that when the time is right, the same idea will appear in a bunch of places more or less at the same time, right? And then somebody will be just lucky to kind of be the person or, the team that ended up being more successful with their particular take on that idea, right? So obviously, back in 2013, the time was right, and looking at colored coins and master coin and whatnot to kind of like, okay, how can we reimagine and build on Bitcoin, right? And I understand that for many people, well, at least for some people in the Bitcoin community, anything that is not Bitcoin is a red herring, that takes people away from Bitcoin, right? But for me, I don't think that this is how technology works, right? Because technology always progresses forward, right? We can never take a particular technology and say, hey guys, now we're done, this is it, and this is the perfect technology, right? It's perfect, but then we have new hardware, new capabilities, new ideas, new math, and then people always improve and build on that, right? And that's happening with Bitcoin itself at a different, pace, but, this is a very natural progression, right? So for me, when I read their initial white paper, Ethereum white paper, again, like, because I could only, as a educated amateur, understand this space, but it made a lot of sense. It's like, hey guys, Bitcoin is awesome as a ledger, the system, for being this decentralized financial asset, and I felt this was fantastic, because I'm a big fan of, if you will, I don't normally refer to myself as libertarian, but if you want to use another label for me, that's as good as any, right? So for me, Bitcoin is the epitome of this kind of like fuck the system, and we can build a better system ourselves, right? So, but then again, you take any kind of technologist and you tinker with technology and you want to improve that, and that was really the genesis for. Like Vitalik looked at this and he participated in a bunch of projects. He was doing a lot of writing for Bitcoin Magazine, looking at things that people were building. And then he came up with an idea. Hey guys, let's generalize a bunch of these ideas and let's try to build this decentralized ledger with just a general Turing machine, on top of this, right? And it was an idea. And really, he said that many times himself that he kind of was thinking, well, people will quickly find some holes in this idea because it seems to make sense, and how come nobody else is talking about this? But people actually got excited, right? And then his other thought was like, oh, then hopefully then somebody will take this idea and run with it. But actually, things happened differently again. People came to him and they asked him, hey, Vitalik, you should kind of push this forward. And obviously, any success always has many fathers. So now, it's hard to throw a rock without hitting some kind of Ethereum co-founder, right? And obviously lots of people contributed to the project and keep contributing to the project. And, new people come, some people, get hurt. And going back to what you mentioned in the beginning about Vitalik's leadership, my personal perception of this is that people can sense that he's sincere. Some people like to make fun of Vitalik. Oh, he's weird in this way, and he's doing this thing, whatever. But if you ever spend some time with him and talk to him, you cannot go away without realizing, one, he's smart, and two, he's very sincere, right? And people like sincerity because there are lots of awesome, smart people. But again, every human is unique, and we all end up being this unique set of human characteristic, from our IQ to our empathy, compassion, sincerity, greed, anger, so many things, right? And people are attracted to some attributes, right? And for me, that was kind of like the genesis of the Ethereum community was really around two things. Like one, it was a bunch of people who like, okay, Bitcoin is awesome, but how can we tweak it even further? Can we build something even more complicated and awesome on top of this, right? And that's still there, still to be judged. There's a lot of stuff happening with Ethereum, but it still has not realized the original vision by far, right? But then the other aspect of Ethereum community was that a bunch of people felt that there was a lot of like Bitcoin community, there was a lot of this kind of animosity, if you will, in the discussions. And I know that a bunch of people who were among the core Ethereum team, they really wanted to for them it was like, hey, let's create this community where there will be better kind of dialogue between the people involved in this, right? So anyways, and that's kind of how it started, and then it went through many trials and tribulations and challenges and whatnot.
Yeah, and that point about the Bitcoin community and the kind of the form of discussion there is an interesting point. I think we got to exchange a few tweets about that too. Back when I was on Twitter, I was on Twitter in the past, but that was in the past.
Right.
I don't believe in Twitter anymore.
Right, that's in your past.
I'm done.
Right, and by the way, just a quick comment on that, right? Because for me, this is kind of second-hand perception because I've never been involved in that, back then. I do know that on Twitter, a bunch of people are quite abrasive, and especially I know that, again, people with that mindset that anything that is not Bitcoin detracts from Bitcoin. They frequently kind of come across as very aggressive, like, oh, Vitalik is a scammer and Ethereum is a scam. Well, not a scam. Is it a success? Not quite yet, but, has it achieved a lot of interesting progress, for the ideas it has announced? I think it has.
Yeah, so, I will say, I've said multiple times that personally I don't think it's fair to call Ethereum a scam. I don't exactly see, I know I'm going to get a lot of pushback now, as I often do when I say that, but I don't really see why Ethereum should be labeled a scam. I don't see much scammy about it. It's a project. I don't necessarily agree with all of its goals or its claims, but that doesn't make it a scam. And I used to be bullish on Ethereum in the past. I'm just not now, but that's me. I don't think it's fair to call it a scam or to call Vitalik a scammer. And people seem to bring up those small details, but you said something about quantum computers, and no, there was an ICO, and there was. But if you look into things, well, the ICO, obviously, anyone who participated in the ICO is made a lot of money. So you can't say that investors were scammed, right? So, what's the scam? Where is the scam? Obviously, investors are happy. And obviously, it's a project that made a lot of progress. So it's really hard to call it a scam, in my opinion. But
it's very easy, Udi. Again, you just have to look at this differently, right? Because end of the day, all our judgments, they come from our emotions, right? Like if we believe in something, right, and if we came to the conclusion this is their best and ideal solution for something, then everything else we have to resist that and say if this is not the right thing, so it has to be negative, and then you can call it a scam, you can call it whatever, right? So I totally get it when people talk about this, right? So it's not a surprise. So I think it's this is how humans are built. Yeah,
I get what you say. I think though that's kind of the easy way out in a way, because yes, you're right, it's definitely happened sometimes. But also, I think some people have actual concerns or actual criticism. Like for me personally, I was invested in Ethereum, and I at some point decided that I'm not going to be invested in it anymore. And I wish, I didn't want to make the decision. I was hoping that things would turn out differently. I wasn't happy about it. It's not what I hoped for. And I think a lot of people are like that. Not all of them. You're right. Some are just, they only care about Bitcoin. But I think a lot of people have a more open mind than that. And the saying, well, these guys just want Bitcoin and that's why they hate everything else feels like kind of the easy way out sometimes. There are some people like that, but I don't think it's as common as some people will say. Like people are interested in Bitcoin because it gives them something. And I think a lot of people would wish that Ethereum would give them the same thing or better, but it just doesn't. One of the obvious things to me is just the way that Ethereum is. I just find that Ethereum Ether, the asset Ether, is mutable, kind of by design, because it changes over time. Like it's going to change soon with Ethereum 2.0. Things are going to change. We don't even know all the details of that yet because not everything is decided. But yes. The Ether asset is going to change.
Yes. But
the issuance rate is going to change. Sorry to interrupt
you, right? But everything in this world is going to change, right? I'm going to die, we're all going to die. Sure. And Bitcoin is going to change, right? Because people say, oh, Bitcoin has this 21 million supply. And my answer to that is yes, maybe, because I do agree that this is the current intent, right, of the community. And many people feel strongly about that, right? But only time will tell if it will be successful, well, let's say 5 years from now or 10 years from now, right? Will the network be sustainable running, on fees alone and stuff like that? And the same with Ethereum, right? Will Ethereum succeed in implementing its vision whether, in a few years? Who knows, right? Maybe Binance Chain will be the real solution, or maybe, who the fuck knows, Cardano. That's really the thing, so.
I am sure it's, it could happen. It could happen, but I think that, if you look at Bitcoin, what is Bitcoin? How is Bitcoin defined? When you define a second in time, the unit of time second, then it's defined by these days it's defined by the distance that the time that it takes light to travel such and such distance, right? And that's the scientific definition right now. And I think that similarly you could say the definition of Bitcoin is that it is one part of the 21 million supply. And it's true that the definition could change. It's true. I just don't think it's very interesting. You could say, oh, maybe I buy, maybe I buy a year of education for my children, and then when I look back in a month, then maybe they change the definition of a year. It's possible. You know,
And
maybe
they did,
all
right?
of us.
You know, they moved people to online education.
True.
Yeah.
It's possible. It's possible, but I mean, I'm not sure we have to. You know, I'm not sure it's everything is possible. I agree with you.
Yes.
But I think we know that Bitcoin has this very, very clear intent and distinction and plan to have 21 million units. It's a very strong meme. I often say that, you know, my grandmother knows that Bitcoin has 21 million units. I didn't tell her that. She found out. So it's you know, people know. I think the meme is pretty strong. Can it change? Everything can change. But I think it's, you know, with ethers, that's not the plan. The plan is to definitely change it. We don't even know into what. And with Bitcoin, we have a plan. The plan is clear. People support the plan is clear. And so for that reason, I can see why people want that. Now, I can also see why some people don't want that. It's also, I mean, I get it, obviously. But the people who do want that, I can, you know, I definitely see why they don't find interest in Ether. It just it just doesn't give them what they want. So it's not necessarily about like
And let me actually comment on that, right? Because one of the things that every single human wants is certainty. We want to know that, you know, this is certain, that this person will love me, that I'm not going to die tomorrow or whatever. And the same, like, that's why Bitcoin is so attractive, because it does have very strong intent and proposition that, you know, there will be 21 million units, right? And you will not be fucked the way you're being fucked by the Federal Reserve System and every other, you know, reserve system, fiat system in the world. So yeah, of course, that certainty is very attractive, but you also have to kind of understand that the other side of this is our fear, right? Because why do we want certainty? Because we're fucking scared, right? We don't know, like, okay, what happens if, you know, the currency is debased. So for me, like, yeah, Ethereum is, if you will, is scary in this way. There's way more uncertainty. Will it succeed? What will be the supply? Will they implement EIP 1559 or whatever, right? Will, you know, Vitalik continue to be the leader of this? So who knows? Like, will it be taken over by somebody else? Lots of uncertainty. So yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I just think, you know, that this distinction is what really drives people to prefer one over the other. That's not the only thing. There are also social reasons. There's the happenstance of just where you happened to kind of begin your journey, and sometimes you stay there. There are tons of reasons. But I think that if someone enters the cryptocurrency space today and looks into different assets and chooses Bitcoin over Ether, then often that will be the reason. If they choose Ether over Bitcoin, then often that will be the reason.
Yes, and I think, like, if you look at the, you know, what's been happening in the last, let's say, few years, right? You can also see that Bitcoin is more attractive for people who are entering the crypto space based on that desire to have a very stable, very reliable asset, right? And then Ethereum space, then it actually attracts people who like to tweak stuff and build stuff, right? Like, you know, so that kind of it has obviously amazing, huge and growing community of developers, right? So people are trying to build stuff, and a lot of this, like, it's plaything, so it's like, you know, it's a sandbox still, but you know what? There's awesome potential there to be built. Whether the potential will be realized, we will see. So yeah, I mean, there are people who've been self-segregating, if you will, based on kind of what is of more interest to them.
Yeah. So just, you know, just in that, I definitely agree with you. I think that a lot of people who are developers and tech people, tech-oriented, are often more interested in Ethereum. That's like something that, and by the way, sorry, just mild bits. If you could just move a bit, because I think you might be obscuring the camera behind you. Just, thank you. That's great. Thanks. Sorry about that. Yeah, and you know, there's the thing with tech people, developers. I think you have software development background, and I do too. So we both know this. We like the shiny new toy very often, right? Yes. We like the latest framework and latest library, and we like to use that to build all the things. And we've seen that to some degree, at least in Ethereum. Let's say in 2017, with a lot of people who were saying, you know, they heard about Ethereum for the first time, so they said, okay, let's just shove it into everything. Let's build a taxi service that's on Ethereum and a matching service on Ethereum and whatever. And that's something that developers
this is
do
a
very
really
often.
good point too, right? Because I think that for a lot of people involved in technology, quite often they kind of put in the cart before the horse, because they kind of get very excited about a particular technological solution, then like, oh, and what problems can it solve? Let's kind of plug it into this problem and this problem, right? But that's kind of one perspective. Another perspective is like, can you start with the problem you're trying to solve, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of why, because like a lot of people look back at the ICO time of 2017, I got a lot of requests like, oh, can you be an advisor? And obviously just because of my last name, right? Oh, I'm Vitalik's dad. Oh, wow. So, but when I looked at the documents, I looked at Whitepaper, like, what the hell is this? Like, this doesn't make any fucking sense. People is really just, in their end of the day, they just trying, they really want to make money, or some of those people are idealists and they want to solve a problem, but they're not thinking hard enough about the problem, and they just like, oh, blockchain, decentralized, this is popular, let's kind of plug it into a particular problem. But that's not kind of really how it works. So.
Yeah. I just have to stop you for a moment because the audio from you is a bit shaky. I don't know if it's just me. Can you guys show me a sad emoji if you can't hear Dmitry very well? I don't know what that means. I guess it's fine for you guys. Can everyone hear Dmitry? Yeah, it looks like it. Okay, so let's go on. Yeah, I agree with you. It was very, especially in 2017, it happened a lot. Those kind of white papers, and I think I want to get to it in a moment, but I think that it seems from my point of view at least that projects on Ethereum now make more sense, at least. They're not the same crazy things that are just plugged in there. They at least they have some financial background. They have they seem to do something that's a better fit. But I'll go back to that in a minute. I wanted to ask you about back to the white paper thing. You said that Vitalik showed you the white paper back in 2013, and I probably talked to you about this maybe even before. And I mean, clearly Vitalik made the decision. I don't know if it was planned or not, but he had his name out in the open, his face out in the open. When Satoshi wrote the white paper 12 years ago, he decided to do that pseudonymously. He left pretty shortly after that. I think it was 2 years later. And Vitalik made a very different decision. And I wonder if that's something that, like, you spend time thinking with. Was that something you were concerned about him being so public with it so early on? And did you maybe think it wasn't the great approach?
It was not an explicit decision. It was kind of more how things played out to be, right? Because again, like if you look back at the history of this, so Vitalik was involved. There was Bitcoin Magazine, studying a lot of different projects, writing about them. Then he got involved a bit with Colored Coins. I believe it was Mastercoin and the other projects. And so the whole space, end of the day, it's open source space, right? So it's really about collaborations. So when it made a lot of logical sense just to throw that idea out there. And as I mentioned before, at that point when Vitalik published the white paper, he was more like, yeah, probably will people like, who am I? I'm a like 19-old guy, and smart, experienced people will probably find a lot of holes in this project and they will shut it down. And, that was kind of part of this thinking, right? But yeah, so it was not explicitly a concern or something that was carefully decided. And
right.
But that was definitely was not easy when the project moved forward and became as popular as it was. Then obviously Vitalik ended up being attacked a lot by a lot of people, and for again a young guy, like it was a lot of psychologically it was very difficult, because he looked at this like, what the fuck is going on? Like, I'm trying to build this better technology that can do something better for the world, and then people telling me that I'm a scammer, that they hate me, they post this pictures and whatnot, right? and then it escalated to all kinds of other stuff. Like if you recall, I think back in 2014 or 15. It was later on when people posted that fake news about his death, trying to gain the market.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
When you open, all kinds of stuff happens, and you have to learn to deal with that. And that was not easy for him. I know. Like I would say that only maybe in the last couple of years, then it became easy. That public-facing figure of Ethereum, but there was a lot of challenges for them with that decision.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine. So it wasn't really an explicit decision. It was
No.
kind of just how things rolled out. Yeah, and it makes sense because there was this discussion, obviously, before that happened, and by the time that it became more serious, then people already knew who he was. And yeah, I mean, people still. I find that in the Bitcoin community, you see a lot more people who try to stay pseudonymous. Today too, like just they do want to communicate with other people. They do want to they start businesses and projects and whatever with other people, but they often try to stay pseudonymous when they're online.
And you can actually see.
And in the Ethereum community, I see that
is
less.
also experimenting with that, right? If you look at DeFi space and the whole sushi swap saga, and some other recent stuff like Harris Finance and whatnot. So I mean, I think that they'll keep happening, right? But I think that also for people when they evaluate in projects, one aspect of this is whether they can. What they think about the person, right? To give you one example, I don't know how many of you know about YFI, the project led by Andrei Kronj, but for me, it's like it's very important for me to understand, to get a sense of like who is this person running this project, right? And if I get a good sense, if I get a positive vibe, it goes, a lot for me toward positively evaluating a particular project, right? Like if it's an anonymous project, then I tend to be much more conservative with that. And
yeah, that makes sense, of course. I find it interesting. I don't know how. I wonder if it has something to do with just the way that Ethereum was started in a more open way. It wasn't just Vitalik. Was, as you said, there were a lot of founders or co-founders for Ethereum, and they were all very open. They went to the conferences. They told people about it way before it launched, way before the pre-sale and so on, and was very open in that way, as opposed to Bitcoin, which was very it started online only. No one saw each other's face probably until years later. Of course, there was this original group that knew each other, but other than that, it was a very kind of pseudonymous environment, and
probably also for good reasons, right? Because Bitcoin is disrupting the financial system, right? And it did disrupt it, right? And we hope to see the fruits of that disruption, grow way more than what happened so far. But then Ethereum was not really doing that. It was more like, okay, so, obviously the financial industry, the whole financial system is being disrupted by decentralized tech. So the concept of Ethereum was more like, oh, let's build this cool, complicated, Bitcoin-related technology that can do cool stuff in a decentralized way, right? And there was a bunch of ideas about how it can be used, and a bunch of them we were outlined in the original Ethereum Whitepaper, and many more came up ever since, and will again be realized in the next few years. So it was not as risky, if you will, I think, perception. Like, of course, outside of the whole SEC, financial, and whatnot.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you think that? I don't know. For me, again, I try to interact with the Ethereum community. I've been to a few conferences. We fight each other on Twitter when I was on Twitter in my past long ago. I try to interact with the Ethereum community to basically to stay in touch, to see what's going on. And I don't. One of the things that really struck me, this whole privacy thing that seems to really be missing. Like, I can easily I've joked about it a few times, but it's true. I can easily tell you, like, oops, sorry, I got muted for some reason. I can easily tell you about the Ethereum addresses of some people on Twitter just because they do a good job of leaking it, and then just see, their entire transactional history, see what they're invested in, see what trades they did, and do you think, like, for me, this seems like a huge problem, but I also,
in what sense you mean?
In the sense that it's dangerous for them, and it's dangerous for people who might join that, but also maybe because I see that people are so okay with it, and I'm thinking, maybe I'm missing something. Maybe it's not that bad. I don't know. Because people use Venmo and show the entire world what payments they do, right? But that's small payments. I just feel like if everyone knows what trades you do every day, all the time, it's kind of too much information to share. But maybe do you think I'm maybe looking at it wrong, or
no? You look at it exactly right, but you only look at it from your perspective, right? As we can always look at things only from our personal perspective, and each person has their own personal sense of what is privacy to them, what do they want to keep private versus like what they're okay with being open about. And for you, this is you draw a line at this, and for other people it's different. Like in some ways I'm more private about some things because again I grew up in the Soviet Union, and I know also like I distrust the government by default, right? But many people, especially let's say Vitalik, he mostly grew up in Canada, right? So for him that's much less of an issue, right? And many other people, it really depends on what was the environment where you grew up, what was the emotional, if you will, sense in your family, in the country of your origin, what was your experience, and so on.
Fair enough. I'll still be careful, but fair enough. I mean, it's
like personally, I believe privacy is. Like in this fight that we currently have between the surveillance and privacy, I think that's a huge fight. And I don't know if you guys, many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with Cory Doctorow, right? But he's got this wonderful trilogy. And I just finished the first book of the trilogy, The Little Brother, and it's a really awesome story about this. Like, there is a act of terrorism and how their state can easily clamp down on you and then use those excuses to do all kinds of horrible things to you. And actually, looking back at the places that still I'm connected with somehow, Russia and Belarus, there is actually tons of horrible abuse happening to people because of, they have not been valuing their own privacy enough, and now they've been screwed by their government. So.
Yeah. And we're talking about privacy, but both of us are wearing Facebook headsets on our heads right now with cameras that take pictures of the entire thing around us, and they track our movements, and we seem to be okay with it. So I guess, I don't know. It's not ideal. Not ideal, but we all make privacy mistakes in this day and age.
Well, it's like, when you think about the security of the system, right? Like, is the system secure or not secure? Is Bitcoin secure or not? And so on. It really, the answer, it depends. It depends on what particular threat scenarios are you looking at, right? And the same thing with privacy. Like, okay, what are the threat scenarios? Are you trying to protect yourself from kidnappers, from, NSA, from Putin? It really depends.
Yeah. That reminds me of that case of Virgil. Sorry, I forgot his last name. The guy was charged. Who was charged with the whole North Korea thing, and I mean, personally, I really hope that it gets resolved as soon as possible and can go home. But I look at it and I think, it seems like it really puts the stark difference between what I see often from the Bitcoin community and the Ethereum community, where in the Ethereum community there's this, you can call it this kind of experimentation tendency, where people say, we have this vision and we want to follow this vision, we're proud of that vision, we're going to talk about it, we're going to talk about the things we do, we're going to show everyone, we're going to be very open about it, and people are just going to accept us, Whereas in Bitcoin, often people are much more defensive. They're like, I'm just not gonna tell you anything, And so I don't need to worry about what other people think, whether it's people, whether it's companies, whether it's governments, whether it's whatever. I'm just going to be shut down. And in that sense, it's much more defensive.
Yes.
I don't have a question. I was just rambling. It's a very stark difference. I'm really interested personally in the difference between those two communities, because I think it's more than just. I don't think that Bitcoiners are afraid of Ethereum, and I don't think Ethereum are afraid of Bitcoin in the large sense. Of course, there are. A lot of people hold both Bitcoin and Ethereum, obviously, and I don't think it's but there's this. I think there are many interesting properties and differences between them, so I'm just bringing it up.
Of course, right? And then if you look at, you can see how different kind of people, they end up gravitating towards different, blockchains, right? Because you look, let's look at Zcash and Monero, right? Those are the people who are even more concerned about privacy in general, right? Or, look at something like Tron. Okay, these are the people who really
interested in colorful logos.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, I guess you have that too. What? Maybe you can tell me. It's a curveball question. Maybe you can tell me about because obviously you and Vitalik talked about. I know we've talked with a ton of people about Ethereum before you launched it, and obviously consulted you too. And can you give us one piece of advice that you think was very important, either before or during or lately, whatever, about anything about Ethereum? Do you think was something that he ended up adopting?
Frankly, he did not take or he did not ask for much advice or any, and I think that there were some good reasons for that. And over the years, if it was me building Ethereum, and then I would have done it very differently, right? Because with my experience building companies, most of their it's really about structure, processes, and so on, right? But Vitalik came into Ethereum through open source, right? So he had very different ideals and priorities, right? So the way he was building it was very different. Then also he was a young adult who was just kind of building, if you will, or becoming a young adult, right? So for him, it's listen to his dad, who the fuck needs that, right? That was also one aspect. And I respected that. It was important for him to be his own man, if you will. I did try to, how to put this, if I look back at my own progression, right? As you said, I'm a computer science guy with my original background, and then I was building businesses. And for me, if I look at the trajectory of what I have learned, or let's say 25 years of my professional career, that end of the day, it's all about people. It's all about people understanding, is this a good person? That sounds try it, but I think this is very important. And this was one thing that I was trying to kind of really share with him, is that, Vitalik, as you building the team and doing this, how can you guys make sure that you're not just building technology, but you're also building connection with each other? You understand what is each person about, how do you communicate about all this quote-unquote soft stuff, right? The emotional intelligence, trust and things like that. So this is something that whenever I have a chance to talk to him in the last, 6-7 years since he started Ethereum, which is not that often actually, but this is something that we talk quite a bit, and this is something that I hope that I can keep sharing with him and others.
Yeah, that's cool. That's definitely a good lesson. And is there anything you learned from the way that Vitalik tackled things in Ethereum that changed your perception of things?
I mean, for me, the way they were doing this, it looked very unstructured, right? And led to lots of problems. So it's lots of things and resources and timing. But when I look at the Ethereum community today, I really appreciate that it's a very robust and resilient community with a lot of different people. So it's always so funny to me when people talk about, oh, Ethereum, Vitalik can do this, and then everybody will jump and implement it. Well, fuck that. If you talk about that, you really guys have no clue about the Ethereum community, because there are lots of people who have their own opinions, and they, lots of different, look at the variety of clients. And it's going to be even better with Ethereum 2 and so on. So I think that the way community ended up being so widely distributed geographically, and so it's very messy. I would say it's much messier, but because of its messiness, it's also resilient and creative, right? That my personal learning over time is that the more diverse your community is, and the more loosely coupled, if you will, then it actually gives you more resilience and also more creativity, while you do lose some efficiency, right?
Yeah. The efficiency part is very apparent sometimes. Yeah, I mean that's and then
Ethereum Foundation, right? And for a long time, I had a lot of issues with the way it was kind of structured and organized and whatnot. And again, just looking at it peripherally, it's not like I was plugged in some special way, but looking at it from the outside, there are lots of issues. But I know that for Vitalik it was important not to he didn't want to be that CEO/dictator guy who sits there and makes the decisions. So he was letting things unfold as they were unfolding. And that led to a bunch of problems and a bunch of inefficiencies, but also led to many other different kind of leaders emerging in that community.
Yeah. Do you think he'll be able to kind of step down from this kind of leadership position or leadership? I don't know if it's a leadership position, but it's it's what people expect
from his role. Yeah. I mean, I think it's a process that takes time, and that has happened to a significant degree already, because if you look back a few years ago, Vitalik was doing a lot of thinking and research, collaborating with a lot of people, and he still does a lot of that, right? He publishes a lot of his research and his blog posts, he collaborates with academia and whatnot, but much less so, and there are tons of amazing people who are doing research, contributing, building stuff, so that has already been, if you will, much more distributed in the community than it used to be. He's still, if you will, a figurehead, or the face of the community, and that's kind of, he's trying to get away from that, but that's a question kind of what the community and the society decides. It's not just what he decides, but I think over time that's becoming more of a case.
Right.
I do know that kind of longer term, he does have some other interests, right? He's interested in longevity research and some other things, right? So I think that, let's say 5 years from now, where I do hope we will have very robust and awesome Ethereum, whatever 2, 3, whatever it is, and running, then I think that there are much higher chances that Vitalik will be less involved with Ethereum as such, and more involved with other initiatives and things. But this is my speculation. Right, he might end up becoming a father, and I don't know how many of you guys have kids, but that also kind of throws you a big curveball when you have that, and your priorities shift quite a bit.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. I'm gonna take this away to somewhere else. So you mentioned, how you grew up in the Soviet Union, and you kind of lived through its collapse, right? And I wonder, a lot of people today, I don't know, it's hard to imagine for me what it was like, to be in the Soviet Union and see, I'm sure you can feel that the thing is collapsing. And a lot of people today, in the recent year, but also in the recent few years before that, seem to have this notion of society collapsing or changing in a very, and I wonder if, from your point of view, if you saw what it actually looks like when a nation collapses, if you feel like this is maybe a bit exaggerated, or if you do see some similar signs.
Well, it's always a matter of degree, right? It's like if you're exposed to a certain range of things, right? This is kind of your range of sensitivity, right? And if, let's say that you're exposed to a range of things, from, let's say, 1 to 2, then a change of 0.1, that's like 10%, right? But if you have exposure to a range of 1 to 10, the same kind of change is much smaller perception, right? So if I look back to my Soviet Union experience, well, it was really fucked up, right? The city where I lived, Grozny, it was bombed, basically destroyed totally. The whole Russian population had to flee that, and then eventually the city was rebuilt, and now it's a very different type of city with a native population. This kind of stuff, how likely is that to happen in a modern society? Not very likely, right? Stuff like food riots and whatnot. So things are quite serious for sure, right? But I think that the society still is much more resilient and has learned to be much more civil about things than the way it was 50 years ago. And again, in the current moment, it's hard to see that because within your context, within your life, it's like, oh wow, things feel so strange and difficult and whatnot. But it's all a matter of perspective. The more you can step out of this, and you can kind of look at and I think that the more a person is exposed to how people live in different places around the world, the more perspective it gives to them. So I know that for Vitalik, one of the foundational experiences of his life was when he dropped out of university. He spent about a year traveling to different places. He went to Israel. That's kind of where he worked, colored coin and whatnot. And he also spent, I don't recall how much time, but he left in this anarchist commune in Catalonia, right? And it was a pretty interesting experience for him because he mostly grew up in Canada from 6 years old, and Canada is a nice civilized country. And now he's sleeping on a mattress, eating 1 meal a day, and there's no hot water and stuff like that. So for everybody, the more experience like that you get, then you get a better perspective. Like, yeah, humans are very resilient and they can live through all kinds of experiences, and you actually get to appreciate what you have more, and then also you're, let's say, much less riled up about things that you understand that the relative scope or priority of things can be very different with a broader perspective.
Yeah, that makes sense. So kind of for me, I think it's kind of connected to this. I've been following some of your media appearances and your online tweets and whatever, and it's I've seen you more than once saying and correct me if I'm misrepresenting you, but I get the feeling, I'm definitely not quoting you, but I get the feeling you've a few times you've said something along the lines of the world is the way it is for a reason, it went through a process, events happen, and they affected the systems of whether it's political systems or personal behaviors or financial systems, whatever it is. And they didn't just, start in vacuum. They built up upon hundreds and thousands of years, and right. Things have affected each other. And there's, if you look at, for example, the financial system today, and you say, oh, if you just learn about how the financial system works, and then you just show up and say, oh, but it shouldn't be like that and shouldn't be like that, then you're missing on how over hundreds of years we ended up with a system that's built that way because it got there for reasons. It didn't just happen to get there, right?
Yes.
So, and then again, you see, especially, and there's definitely some of that in the Bitcoin space as well, but I think especially in Ethereum, in the DeFi space recently, you see a lot of people who just say, hey, let's rebuild finance. Let's just scratch everything. Let's build everything from scratch again and do it differently. And I wonder how you reconcile those two point of views, because on one hand, I think you're a very big believer of, things got to the way they are because they, that's the way they should have happened. And also, like, let's restart everything and start from scratch, which is a very, like, liberal, non-conservative view. So how do you,
Sure.
reconcile those two?
You summarized it pretty well. And for me, they're not contradictory at all, right? For me, it's like, again, things are the way they are for some good reasons, but it doesn't mean that I'm saying let's just sit back and just go with the flow, right? It's like, if things are fucked up, let's change them, right? But when I say fucked up, I mean that, can we do that without the judgment, right? Because if you want to build something, you want to build a better system, by all means go for that, right? Like, if you want to build better financial system, build that. But to do that, you don't have to deny. You don't have to, like, say, like, Ethereum is a scam or whatever, right? And this applies to any other thing that we do. It's like, again, it's very natural progression. Like, the universe always evolves, right? And, let me give you a political example, right? Like, I'm less familiar with US politics, but let's say if I look at back in Russia, and Putin is there, right? And, like, I hate his fucking guts, but on the other hand, he's the outcome of, couple of hundreds years at least of, the history of Russia and the Tsarist oppression and whatnot. And on the other hand, there are all kinds of things happening there. And there's this famous positioner who they were trying to poison and kill him. He's trying to change things, right? So this is very natural. Things are progressing. But how to put this? Universe is still overall, if you guys look at longer-term trends in terms of, like, poverty, conflict in the world and things like that, like, a lot of them, they're trending up, right? And again, within their, and it's very natural aspect. We as humans, we want to build better things, we want to build better lives, and we want to understand each other better and so on, and this is happening all the time, right? Like, if you look at things like gray rights and whatnot, and the same thing with, like, financial system, political system, right? So let's understand that what we have is for good reasons, right? Because frequently people then try to blame, oh, it's this way because of this conspiracy theory. It's like, George Soros is, like, fucking all us up and whatnot. Well, maybe, but who cares, right? Like, instead of thinking about what is wrong with the current system, let's try to build a better system. And also, as we do that, let's be very sensitive to all the aspects of the current system. Why is it the way it is, right? And also be very mindful of how disruptive how do we make it easy for people to adopt what we're building? How do we disrupt their lives, in as little as possible, right? And this is really, if you look at the crypto space, it's still a huge jump for most people to, like, install an app and learn about this and, passwords and the realization that if they lose their, private key, then they've lost their money, right? Like, it's a huge deal for the majority of people. So we have to build stuff, but when we build it, let's not kind of be idealistic, but let's be very deeply sensitive to what is the reality, why are the things the way they are, and how do we address that and this new thing that we're building. So I hope that makes some sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. Do you think that people are doing a good job at being mindful of the reasons that things are the way they are? Like, or do we just really start everything from scratch and because that can be a slow process.
Right? Because again,
sometimes
many of you guys, I'm sure you have computer science background, right? And if you take any significant software system that's been running for a while, you know that this system is very fragile. There are a lot of, little, extensions here and some code there, and it's over time, unavoidably, it becomes this huge mammoth, which is very hard to maintain and whatnot. And eventually, you kind of have to build a new system from scratch, and this is the reality. But then you have to think, like, actually, if you look at Ethereum is now going through transition like that, where Ethereum 1 is a reasonable first kind of, it's still a toy, but it's an approximation for a very capable blockchain. And now Ethereum 2 is coming, and how do we change over to this new system. It's really hard to do, right? And that's why it's taken so much longer, because again, people originally were so idealistic. Oh, we'll do this, we'll do a hard fork this, and well, yeah, what about those smart contracts? What about those assets? What about those people? What about those wallets and apps and whatnot? So you have to consider their overall integration of whatever you're building within their overall society, ecosystem, whatever your system is interacting with.
Yeah. Well, you say Ethereum 2.0 is coming now. Now is a liberal word. You take some creative license when you call it now. It could be a while, but I mean,
best guess is that the deposit contract and the phase 0 of Ethereum 2 will be launched in November. That's my current best guess.
Phase 0, phase 0 could be any time. And honestly, there's no reason to. Phase 0 can, but phase 0 is also not very visible. So, but yeah, I mean, I guess that's the thing. It's like, do you think that people understand that part about Ethereum 2.0? That phase 0 is really almost a technical infrastructure thing.
They don't again, it depends on what they mean by people, right? There are people who are technical enough and they understand what's going on, but like in any other community, and you take Ethereum, Bitcoin, any other blockchain community, there are a lot of people who don't really understand what is going on under the hood, so they like, the number should go higher, right? And so for a lot of people, they think like, oh, there will be some magic happening, and Ethereum 2 is going to be launched, and Ethereum will go up. Like, fuck no, this is a very different thing that most people imagine. But it's like one of their many small steps toward the rollout, and I think it is a huge milestone. So,
yeah, okay, fair enough. I'm gonna soon open this to questions from the audience, but before that, I want to ask you about VR, because I think that's the first time you use VR, pretty much, more or less. And did you try any other like games or apps or anything, or is that Altspace is pretty much the only thing you tried?
In terms of VR, yeah, I'm very new to VR. I wanted to do it for a while. But been postponing that, and actually kind of like our interaction with you when you suggested that we do this conversation kind of prompted me to pull the trigger and finally, put in my order, get the Oculus Quest 2, and kind of started exploring this. And yeah, it looks like it's one of those technologies that it's still it's still a toy, but you can see the awesome potential of this, right?
Yeah, you should try Beat Saber. That's what probably most people will tell you. Beat Saber is it's like a music beat game.
Yeah, I think I've heard about it. Yeah, I'll try it. And I'm
probably
pretty awkward at things physical, so that might be a good way to learn that. And
so in that case, you should also take a video and upload it. In that case,
yes.
Yeah,
maybe I'll
it looks like
to celebrate the launch of Ethereum 2.
Yeah, that should be fun. So we'll see it in a couple of years then. And okay, so
now I'll be motivated to delay it. Yeah.
Yeah. And guys, if you want to ask a question, in the bottom right of the screen, you'll see a button that says raise hand. Again, the bottom right of the screen, you'll see a button that says raise hand. You can click it, and then your name will pop up on my screen, and I'll be able to let you ask. So just click the raise hand button if you have anything you want to ask. And I will also ask you, Dmitry, if you tried, well, you probably didn't try them, but if you heard of any of the Ethereum-based VR platforms, there are a few. There's
I've heard about them. I have not tried them because for me, I don't really quite understand their proposition yet, right? So it feels to me like we jump in the gun, but yeah, maybe.
I didn't think we'll come out agreeing about something, Dmitry, but it seems like we're agreeing on a lot. I don't know. It's I don't know. What's your view on NFTs?
I can feel the potential, right? Like I'm still quite skeptical of them, or at least again, another way to say it is like I don't quite understand for a lot of them the value proposition, right? I think there's some potential for NFTs with a lot of like, let's say, how would I phrase that? Like functional attributes built into them versus just like some kind of, this is an image and now it's like on the blockchain and it's unique, and my answer like, okay, and who gives a fuck, like, so a lot of this stuff is not making sense to me. But again, with a lot of things, like I can see there's a lot of experimentation and it's making a lot of sense to a lot of people, right? So when I see that, I'm like, okay, so it's not making sense to me, but it's making sense to, let's say, a few thousand people over here. What do they see that I'm not seeing, right? How can I learn from that? So for now, I'm watching that peripherally. I can see that stuff is happening. Have not done anything yet, like except like buying my, if you can categorize it that, they're buying my ETH domain name. It's like one, obviously, very small example of an NFT, but other stuff, yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. Well, if you're interested, I'll be happy to later introduce you to some of the Ethereum VR people that I think are building interesting things. I don't, I have my reservations, as you can imagine, but I think they do. I will say it's interesting if you look at the VR community is kind of experimental in itself and pretty small, all things considered. Like it's like a very small part.
Second Life already, right?
I think so. Yeah, I think it is. But it's still very, very small, and it's very hard to build like something commercial in VR because you don't have like the amount of investment you have to make to make something that looks visually impressive. It's a very large investment, but your audience is very small, so it's really hard. So that's why you see a lot of apps from Facebook because they can invest in it, but not much more. So it seems like that's. You have a very large percentage of VR startups are actually in one way or another related to Ethereum because what they did is they did an ICO a few years ago,
right?
And that's like where the budget comes from because you need to have like some outsized budget in order to try to be part of the space. So yeah. So there are, I don't understand why they need a blockchain, but there are some interesting projects.
And there are so many people out there are like, oh, let's do stuff on the blockchain because it's a popular technology. I mean, and I'm exaggerating, but for a lot of people, why did you do this project? Like when I think back to 2017, it was really like, oh, because I think that I can raise tons of money, or it's because blockchain is the popular term and blah blah blah, right? And this is obviously they're not the right reasons to do anything blockchain related. And most of those projects, or many of those projects, have died, and I think many more will die. But there will be some gems, and there will be also people who will learn from that, and they will keep building further stuff, building on top of that.
Like Tron.
Yeah, amazing.
Amazing logos, man. They have great logos, in my opinion. Colorful. Okay, people are a little shy. I don't see people asking questions. I think they're shy today. Maybe they'll reach out to you privately, maybe not. But
I think
really thanks for
my charisma.
There's what?
I think they're scared of my charisma.
Oh yes.
So maybe
and the pumpkin.
And the pumpkin, yes, the pumpkin is awesome.
Yeah.
The pumpkin is the best CPU she's ever there, by the way. That's her fault. She's carrying everyone. So yeah, Dmitry, thank you for coming over. Wasn't that bad, right?
Wasn't bad. Only shot a few rockets at you. And thank you everyone for showing up. Again, we do meetups every weekend, not the next weekend, because unfortunately I can't make it the next Saturday. But other than that, we do meetups every weekend. So if you're watching this, you can go to recklessvr.com or recklessvr on Twitter or recklessvr on Telegram and sign up, and you'll get invites every week. Those are pretty fun. Usually we do things that are more Bitcoin oriented, but this is Halloween, so I thought we should do something scary like Ethereum.
Yes, and
should do something scary. Yes,
okay,
and that's it.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Take care.
And you can speak now.
Hold your peace.
Presumably. Okay. Let's see.